أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام را تلك آيات كتاب حكيم. أكان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم أن أنذر الناس وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم. قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين. إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يدبر الأمر ما من شفيع إلا من بعد إذنه ذلكم الله ربكم فاعبدوه أفلا تذكرون. إليه مرجعكم جميعا وعد الله حقا إنه يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ليجزي الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات بالقسط والذين كفروا لهم شراب من حميم وعذاب أليم بما كانوا يكفرون. هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا وقدره منازل لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. إن في اختلاف الليل والنهار وما خلق الله في السماوات والأرض لآيات لقوم يتقون. إن الذين لا يرجون لقاءنا وردوا بالحياة الدنيا وطمأنوا بها والذين هم عن آياتنا غافلون أولئك مأواهم النار بما كانوا يكسبون. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات يهديهم ربهم بإيمانهم تجري من تحتهم الأنهار في جنات النعيم دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah, brother Zunair Wasim. One more last salawat for him. At this time, I'd like to invite Sister Abba for recitation of poetry with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I couldn't think of a fancy title for this, but this is a poem for Imam Sajjad. You taught me how to speak to God in the chaos of my youth. In a world of heightened darkness, you illuminated truth. You sweetened Tawheed for me like the nectar of a flower, revealing the hidden softness of God's abounding power. In your worship, I beheld the exquisite beauty of my Lord and fell in love with him anew through the beauty of your words. In the whispered prayer of the lovers, the tender sweetness of your praise cast light upon his face like the sun's most vivid rays. In the whispered prayer of the knowers, through the lens of your intellect, I learned the quiet power of a humble dialect. Your love taught me the ecstasy of kneeling in submission. The depth of your sujood purified my inner vision. In your 30 years of weeping, you taught me humanness, unveiling the duality of agony and bliss. The eloquence of your sermons lit a fire in my soul. By the light of your du'as, I am learning to be whole. O beauty of the sajideen, the sinner's heart is captivated. Through your risalat al-hukuk, I am truly liberated. Through the principles and values espoused by the divine, you have given us a framework for the freedom of mankind. I tremble when I think about the gravity of your patience and the gratitude and trust that adorn your invocations. You are subject to brutalities beyond imagination, and yet the recurring theme in every single supplication is nothing but conviction in God's supremacy and espousals of your nothingness, of pure humility. In the dichotomy of your being, I find both gentleness and might, the tranquility of morning and the solemnity of night. When the pressure of my sins weighs too heavy on my heart, your du'as piece back together what the world has torn apart. My Imam, it isn't fair that you've done so much for me, but I wasn't there to help you in your days of agony. How I wish that I could soothe the welts upon your back and shield your tired body from the enemy's attacks. If I could only tend the wounds on your tired, bleeding feet, or ease the burden of the chains that scarred you in the heat. Oh, my beloved, grieving master, I wish I could have been alive to wipe away the tears emanating from your eyes every time your mind remembered the severed heads upon the spears and the memories that haunted you for 30 painful years. The way your father's shroudless body lay in tattered, broken parts. The way the broken spear was lodged in your brother's shattered heart. The way you mourned the heartless slaughter of your tiny infant brother and bore witness to the torment of his broken-hearted mother, then watched your sister die in the prison cell she feared, still holding the severed head of the father you revered, and the wound upon your ghayra that kept your head reclined in grief as the women of your family were paraded through the streets. May my soul be sacrificed for every moment of your pain. I would die 1,000 deaths for you, O beloved of Hussain. Your love takes me to places beyond the threshold of the mind. The story of your life revives my thirst for the divine. At the end of my soul's journey, I don't know what fate awaits me, but the lessons of your life both pain and intoxicate me. In my infinity of weaknesses, I cling tightly to your rope, so when God's judgment is before me, you will be my greatest hope. I have no share of virtues to overcome my grave transgressions, but I pray my love for you might draw forth your intercession. So remember me, Sajjad, the way I think of you these nights, and when my soul is bathed in darkness, please offer me some light. With gratitude I end these words in a heart full of regret. I could not serve you in this life, but may I serve you in the next. Salawat.
Jazakallah khair. Sister Rabab, one more last salawat for her, please. At this time, I'd like to invite Brother Hassan Abbas Kanani for recitation of poetry with a loud salawat.
खुशनुदी जनाब सैयदा सलावत अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा कैदी कहता है कोई कैदी कहता है कोई यतीमा बाबा अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा मैं बयां कैसे करूं अपनी मुसीबत तुमसे क्या करूं अपने तमाचों की शिकायत तुमसे सुनती हूँ दादी ने खाया था तमाचा बाबा अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा नील रुख सारों पे बीनाई भी जिसकी कम हो उम्र हो 4 बरस और उम्र हो 4 बरस और कमर में खाऊं हो आपने देखी है क्या ऐसी ज़ईफ़ा बाबा अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा खून बेशीर से अंदाज़ा किया था मैंने आपका चेहरा तो पहचाने लिया था मैंने आप पहचानोगे कैसे मेरा चेहरा बाबा अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा आप थे दूर तो मैं सारे सितम सहती रही रो पड़ी कूफे के दरबार में मैं सह ना सकी आपके सामने जब शिमर ने मारा बाबा अब अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा। उस घड़ी ढूंढ रही थी मैं चचा जाने कैसे कैसे बतलाऊं कि क्या गुजरी तेरी बेटी पे। हाय मुझको जालियों ने कनीज़ी में जो मांगा बाबा। अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा। बैन ये कहते ही खामोश हुई वो अकबर। बैन ये कहते ही खामोश हुई वो अकबर। आज तो जाएंगे साथ अपने मुझे भी लेके। आपको मेरी कसम, आपको मेरी कसम कीजिए वादा बाबा। अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा। कैदी कहता है कोई, कैदी कहता है कोई, कोई यतीमा बाबा। अब मुझे कोई सकीना नहीं कहता बाबा। पर मोहम्मद व आल मोहम्मद सलावत।
Jazakallah, Brother Hassan Abbas Kanani. One more salvat for him, please. Alhamdulillah, here at CFK, we are honored to host Sheikh Bilal Hussain. Before I request the Sheikh to begin his speech, just a couple of announcements. First and foremost, due to the uptick of COVID cases, face masks are still mandatory for all in-person programs at CFK for our collective safety. If you do not have a mask will be provided to you at the entrances. A reminder for the upcoming programs for next weekend, Friday, September 9th and Saturday, September 10th. We will be commemorating the martyrdom of Lady Sakina bint Hussain Salawat. Program will start promptly at 6:30 p.m. with Quran recitation and then speech by Sheikh Amin Rastani. There will be a Matandari next Saturday starting at 9 p.m. hosted by Anjuman Sher Khoda. For more details, please refer to their flyer. At this time, I'd like to invite Sheikh Bilal to ascend the member and honor the Mu'mineen and Mu'minat with his speech for tonight with Allah Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Briefly to mention a few points of fiqh, or one point of fiqh. There was an interesting question I was asked years ago to show that kids are very foolish, but it was an important question that was worth asking. The question was, how many wajib salat are there? What do you think the answer is? Don't answer, actually, because I was told I was a foolish child because of this, so I don't want anyone to have to get the same label as me. But the common answer is 5, right? We say 5, the 5 salawat of the day. But that's only one. That's one. The salawat yawmiyah, the daily prayers, are one of the wajib prayers that a person has to recite. In total, there are calculated to be 6 wajib prayers. That's 6 prayers that are wajib upon a person to perform. The first of these is salawat yawmiyah, the daily prayers. The second of these, for example, would be salat ayat. Salat ayat is a wajib prayer that has to be performed. It is a category of prayers that is considered wajib. We have an obligation to perform it. The third of these would be salat mayyit. Salat mayyit is wajib kifai, meaning that Muslimin have to perform this wajib prayer when someone passes away. It's wajib on everyone to perform until somebody from the community performs this prayer. So this is known as wajib kifai. It's known as one of the wajib prayers that are an obligation to perform. It's 3. 4 is salawat or salat tawaf for a wajib hajj. When I go to hajj, part of hajj is the responsibility to do tawaf of the Kaaba. My hajj is incomplete without this tawaf, and I can't perform this tawaf without performing the 2 rakat salat that's associated with this tawaf. Therefore, for anyone and everyone and every Muslim that has the ability, hajj is wajib, this salat is wajib. 5th is that prayer that is ihtiyat wujuban wajib. That meaning as an obligatory precaution, it is mandatory to perform, which is the qadha prayers of a father upon the eldest son. Now this is interesting. While it's said that the qadha prayers of a father are wajib upon the eldest son, it is from the very highly recommended actions that, for example, even for a mother, it should be done as well, though it's not labeled as wajib, and that the siblings and community and all together can split that responsibility amongst themselves, but the obligation that's placed is placed on the eldest son. But this is a wajib prayer. And the 6th that's considered as a category of wajib prayer is salat al-nadhar. That's when I make an oath, and I make an oath to fulfill an action, and that oath, when it comes true, it becomes wajib upon me to perform that prayer, and it is considered a wajib prayer that I have to recite. It's kind of a trick question. If you ever want to kind of make someone feel a little childish and young and immature, ask them the question, how many wajib prayers are there? It's a good trivia question. How many wajib prayers are there? And the natural reaction for us is to blurt out the 5. And you say, okay, what are the 5? And they say, well, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib. Say, nope, that's not it. And it kind of is a way of educating and making sure. But the significance of it is not the trivia question. The significance of sharing this as a point of discussion is to ensure that we are aware of what are our wajibat. that don't think that just simply because I've prayed my 5 daily prayers that my wajibat are complete. No, these others are obligations on us as well too. Khususan Salat al-Ayat. Salat al-Ayat is a responsibility for us to perform in cases of eclipses, in cases of earthquakes, in cases of natural disasters that cause fear amongst people. It's something that we have to pay attention to and ensure that we fulfill our obligation. So in this way, we make sure that we know what is our wajibat, we know what our responsibility is, and we make sure that we fulfill them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight's discussion is a look into history at personalities and events that sometimes are not understood or prepared or discussed correctly when discussing the event and waqia of Karbala. While the direct history of the event of Karbala is sometimes a very straightforward experience, there are points within this experience that when we look at the context of history, we seem to get a better understanding of why some of the events happened the way they did. You have to look at history at its entirety and look at the context to see if we can find some similarity. To understand this, there's a few points that we need to talk about. The first of these is understanding who was Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Abdullah ibn Ja'far was the son of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar. Ja'far al-Tayyar is the older brother of Imam Ali. He's the older son of Hazrat Abu Talib. This Ja'far al-Tayyar was one of the close companions and relations of the Holy Prophet who supported the Prophet and led, for example, the Muslims during their persecution from Mecca to Abyssinia. And he pleaded the case of the Muslimin in Abyssinia in front of the king and sought for them protection. Was one of the helpers and companions of the Holy Prophet through many of his difficulties and affairs. At one point in time, Hazrat Ja'far took a small group of soldiers to defend the borders of the Islamic government. And when he went to the border with Syria, where the Romans were on the border, the information had been received that there were skirmishes happening where Romans would cross into the border and raid the Muslim lands. So Ja'far al-Tayyar, Ja'far was sent with a small group of soldiers, maybe 1,000 or so, and he was told, go protect the border. When they reached the border, they found the Roman town, but they found that a legion from the Roman army had been stationed in this town at this point in time. And a legion was 10,000 men, and the comparison between Hazrat Ja'far and his 1,000 and their 10,000 was a question. So Hazrat Ja'far sat with the people that were with him and they started to discuss and debate what should they do. Some people said, there's no way we can win. Why are we going to fight? Let's go back and get reinforcements. Others said, we'll hold the boundary and send some back and some of us stay. And finally, one of them gave the opinion. They said, hey, listen, we've been commanded by the Prophet to defend the border. If we reach shahadat in this process, what's better than that? So they made the decision that we're going to fight at the border and defend the border. And sure enough, Hazrat Ja'far with his small army faced off against a Roman legion, and they were overcome. Now in those days, when you would have a battle like this, they would look to knock out the commander because then the army would break. And Hazrat Ja'far, being the commander of that army, they attacked him and they cut his arm, but he didn't let the flag fall. They cut his other arm, didn't let the flag fall, until eventually they killed him, and then the flag fell and it passed between 2 or 3 companions until it reached the hands of someone who commanded for a retreat of the soldiers from that interaction. The shahadat of Hazrat Ja'far at this situation is the reason why he's known as Ja'far al-Tayyar, Ja'far with the 2 wings. And that the Prophet said for Hazrat Ja'far's sacrifice in this place, that Allah would grant him 2 wings in heaven. The grave of Hazrat Ja'far is today located in modern day Jordan. And it is actually a place to go visit. And if someone ever gets the opportunity to go to Jordan, that it is a place where you can go and you can do his ziyarat and even recite Salat Ja'far al-Tayyar next to Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar. Salat of Hazrat Ja'far al-Tayyar is one of the mustahab a'mal to perform. And it said that if someone has a hajjah that they want fulfilled, a desire that they want fulfilled, one of the good ways to do it is through invoking Hazrat Ja'far. When the news of the shahadat of Hazrat Ja'far reached the Holy Prophet, he went to the house to pay his condolences to the widow. When he entered the house, he found this Abdullah, son of Ja'far, playing in the house. And it said that Rasulullah asked him, "What are you playing?" And he says, "I'm playing shop. And these are my wares and I'm selling them." Rasulullah placed his hand on the head of this child and said, "May Allah give you barakat in anything that you ever buy and sell." They say that this dua of the Holy Prophet is one of the reasons why Hazrat Ja'far Tayyar was one of the wealthiest of the Banu Hashim and wealthiest men of Medina, and one of the most generous men of Medina as well too. Now, one of the interesting things that happens is that Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far, after the shahadat of his father, is actually raised in the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. As such, while we haven't discussed him much, he's a person who is attached to the examples of our Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain, and he was a companion with them and spent time with them, and he was raised under the hand of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He possessed the characteristics of the Ahlul Bayt in their company. There's a story here. You guys want to hear a story? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. To explain to you who this Abdullah ibn Ja'far was. So the story goes, there was an old couple who were Bedouins, meaning they traveled through the desert, and one day the husband had gone out and his old wife, who was an old lady, was alone in the tent, and three men came upon the tent and they called from outside, "Ya Amat Allah, O worshipper of Allah, we are three men whose camels and our goods have been lost, and we were in a journey and we've lost our goods, and we're in need of assistance. Can you offer us assistance?" She said, "Yes." They said, "Can we come in?" She said, "Yes." They came in, they asked, "Do you have anything to drink?" She says, "We have this one sheep, you can milk it, and the milk you can drink." So they milked the sheep, the three men drank the milk. Then they said, "Do you have anything to eat?" She said, "No, we have nothing to eat except this one sheep. You can slaughter it, and you can eat from it." So seeing the permission from the lady, they slaughtered the sheep, they cooked it, they ate it, and they sat for some time and they took respite. And they said, "Ya Matallah, we're on our way to Hajj. So inshallah, when we leave, we're going to go continue our journey to Hajj." And as they leave, they say, "We are the nobility of Quraysh, and we are from the city of Medina. While today we have nothing to give you, if ever you're in need or if ever you come to Medina, please come see us. We would like to thank you for the kindness that you did us." Alhamdulillah, and they left. Now after a little while, her husband came back and he says, "Where's my sheep?" She goes, "Well, these people came, they were in need, and they slaughtered the sheep and they ate it." And he says, "Who were they?" "I don't know, but they were the nobility of Quraysh." And he says, "So you mean to tell me the only sheep that we had, that we would milk and that we kept, you slaughtered it and you fed it to people, and you don't know who you fed it to, and you don't know what you did? And there's no way for us to get anything back for this." And he says, "I'm so upset with you, and خسرنا من هذا. We went through a great loss because of you." Okay. They went through some difficulties. Eventually, this couple, they went through a hard time. They went through problems because of whatever. And they wound up in a state of penury and poverty. And in that process, they would sell whatever they could find, and they relied then going on cities and looking for something that they could sell and make, and then making some money. And in this process of moving from town to town, trying to eke out a living, they wound up in the city of Medina. I'd forgotten about this, and the man set up his shop and tried to find things to sell and sell something, and the woman went to go run an errand and find some resources. And as she had now looking for resources and she walked through the city of Medina, it happened that Imam Hassan was sitting outside of the door of his house, and he saw this woman walk past him. He said to his servant, "Go bring her to me." Servant went and said, "My master has called you, please come." She comes and she says, "What business do you have with me? What do you want?" And he says, "Do you remember some months ago, there were some people who came to you and needed assistance?" She says, "Yes." He says, "I was one of them. I want to thank you for the kindness that you showed me. I'd like to give you compensation for what you did for me." And he gave her 1,000 gold dinar and 1,000 sheep and said, this is my appreciation for what you did to me. He goes further. He says, but my companions also want to thank you. Go to the house of my brother Hussain. He too wants to thank you. She goes to the house of Imam Hussain, and Imam Hussain gives her 1,000 gold dinar, 1,000 sheep. And Imam Hussain says, our other companion would also like to thank you. Go to the house of Abdullah ibn Ja'far. She goes to the house of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, and Abdullah ibn Ja'far says, what did my other two brothers give you? And she says, they gave me 1,000 gold dinars each and 1,000 sheep each. He says, I wish you would have come to me first. We would have broken their bank. And Abdullah ibn Ja'far gives her 2,000 gold dinars and 2,000 sheep in appreciation for what she did. Now, the benefit of this story, while it tells us about the personality of Abdullah ibn Ja'far as being the companion of the Ahlul Bayt and companion of the Aimma alayhimus salam and his generosity, that's not the function of this story, actually. The function of this story is to understand that do good without looking at return from the person. Do good with the interest of seeking khair from Allah, not from people. When we do good, don't wonder that this person didn't appreciate me, they didn't thank me, they didn't give me. Who did I do good for? Did I do good that humanity would recognize me, or did I do good for the pleasure of Allah? The example of this woman, she comes home with one sheep is what they had. 4,000, can you imagine the number of 4,000 sheep? 4,000 sheep and 4,000 gold dinar. Why? Because when she did good, she had no intention of return from the people. She had done good and done kindness for the sake of Allah. And the consequence of that was that what she could not imagine was her compensation. I can imagine what people can give me. I can imagine that I give you one sheep, you give me one sheep. You give me two sheep. But can you imagine I give you one sheep, you give me 4,000 sheep? That's the difference of the significance of paying attention to when I do good for the sake of Allah. What He can compensate me, no one else can compensate me. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This was the personality of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, who was married to Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra. When we look at the character of Sayyidah Zainab as having this great personality, this is who was qualified to be married to Sayyidah Zainab. This was who was worthy of being married to Sayyidah Zainab, one who was raised in the house of Ahlul Bayt. Now there are 2 points to take from here. Everybody's okay? Everybody's good? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first question that comes is that if this was such a close companion of Ahlul Bayt, why wasn't he in Karbala? There are many questions that come up that, for example, if there was someone like Muhammad Hanafiya, if there was someone like Abdullah ibn Ja'far, why weren't they in Karbala? And again, when we look at the entirety and the scope of history, we start to understand that Karbala was one of the facets of the attack of Yazid on Ahlul Bayt. One of the desires that this man had, Mal'un had, was to wipe out the reference of Ahlul Bayt in history. Remove them. Why else do you kill children? Why else do you wipe out an entire family? He wanted to remove this mention, and one of those processes of removing this mention was to remove them from the city of Medina. When Imam Hussain left the city of Medina, had he taken every responsible adult mature member from the city, Marwan ibn Hakam Mal'un and the representatives of Yazid would have taken and usurped all of the properties of Ahlul Bayt, would have destroyed their houses and presence in the city of Medina. Therefore, Imam Hussain leaves behind some people who are the mature, responsible, respected members of the Banu Hashim to preserve and protect the properties and presence of the Banu Hashim in the city of Medina. Imagine that had all these people left, and when the Qafilah would have come back from Sham, there was nothing to come back to. It had all been usurped. It had all been taken away. That the family of the Prophet had been removed. So one of the strategies was not that this was a single faceted battle that happened in Karbala, but rather it was a much larger event that was happening against the attack and the aggressive attack against Ahlul Bayt. Look at the fact that Abdullah ibn Zubayr also was someone that they wanted bay'ah from, but Abdullah ibn Zubayr, when he left the city of Medina, he went to the city of Makkah and they didn't bother him. But Imam Hussain, they didn't let stay in the city of Makkah. Imam Hussain, they chased from place to place. They did not let the Imam rest, meaning the aggression against Ahlul Bayt was extreme in this situation. So one discussion about why some of these people who were considered the true lovers of Ahlul Bayt and family of Ahlul Bayt, that they weren't in this battle of Karbala, was because had no one been left behind, nothing would have remained of their properties, of their positions, of their houses in the city of Medina. That is compensation for not giving the bay'ah, everything would have been lost. Another discussion about Abdullah is that they say that he had some injury or some difficulty where he couldn't ride a horse, that he had faced some kind of injury, that as a consequence he couldn't ride a horse, and therefore he was unable to go with Imam Hussain, and this is another discussion that happens. The second facet of this discussion talks about the children of Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far and Sayyidah Zainab. Now, famously, there are two children that we discussed that were present in the field of Karbala. According to other historians, that they actually had 5 children. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Ja'far and Sayyidah Zainab had 5 children, 4 sons, 1 daughter. The first of whom was Ali, then Aun, then Abbas, then Muhammad, and 1 daughter whose age is not mentioned, who is known as Kulthum. Now, this Kulthum and this name of Kulthum is interesting. In history, this title of Kulthum is attributed to many women, including the fact that while the daughter is known as Kulthum, her mother, Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra, is also known as Kulthum. Sayyidah Zainab al-Sughra, also known as Kulthum. Imam Hussain, according to some historians, had 4 daughters present in the field of Karbala, one of whom was, can you guess? Kulthum. That within history there are many personalities who are known by these names, and some of their information is missing to us. When we look at the Sibaya and we look at the prisoners of the event of Karbala, some of the information is kind of confusing to us and we don't know the details of exactly what happened. But that one of the arguments of why, for example, the position of Kulthum after the event of Karbala is unclear is that, well, there were a number of women, 4 or 5 women who are known as the title of Kulthum who are present, which is why it's not clear which one was it and when she spoke. Same thing, Kulthum, the daughter of Imam Ali, was also known as Sayyidah Zainab. So it's possible that some of the references that qalat Sayyidah Zainab, which one? There's some lack of clarity around this information, but the fact remains that this was something that happened in history and that we have some information, and the discussion around why it's something that's unknown is a longer conversation. But sometimes when we look at history, we find events, as I mentioned, that tie to the waqi' of Karbala that otherwise we may not have seen. Which brings us to the third part of our conversation. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Which talks about an event in history that happened during the imamate of Imam Hussain. Now, many of us are familiar with the 6 months of the imamate of Imam Hussain that are associated with the waqi' of Karbala. However, the imamate of Imam Hussain lasted for a period of 10 years. And there are many different facets and lessons in this 10-year time that are important for us to learn and pay attention to. One of these refers to an event in history where Muawiyah sent the marriage proposal of his son Yazid to the house of Abdullah ibn Ja'far. And he sent it for the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, Kulthum. Muawiyah at that time had taken the Khilafat, so he had his agents, and his agent and his governor of the area of Medina happened to be at that time Marwan ibn Hakam. Marwan ibn Hakam and his history. All right, let's take an aside for a second. You guys ready? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. All right, next time if the salawat's that soft, I'm not taking it aside, all right? I'm just warning you right now. Marwan ibn Hakam and his father Hakam were 2 people who the Prophet of Islam threw out of the nation of Islam, out of the government and lands of Islam. Rasulullah threw them out and cast them out and said, you can't come back. You're not welcome back. However, they were members of the clan of Banu Umayyah. And when the third Khalifa took his position of authority, he brought him back. Not only did he bring him back, he gave him authority. He gave him positions of power. Marwan did not like the Ahlul Bayt because they were the children of that prophet who kicked him out of the country, kicked him out of Arabia. And he had deep animosity towards Ahlul Bayt. The first display of this animosity of Marwan was at the Shahadat of Imam Hassan. And when Imam Hassan was Shaheed, the will of Imam Hassan was to bury me next to the Holy Prophet. This Marwan, at that moment when the janazah of Imam Hassan was brought, stood with soldiers and said, how is it that our relative Uthman will be buried out in the graveyard and your relative Hassan will be buried next to the Prophet? And it said that Marwan went so far as to shoot arrows to stop the janazah of Imam Hassan from reaching the grave of the Holy Prophet. And it was the will of Imam Hassan that should such a thing happen, that there is conflict and confrontation because of my will to be buried next to the Prophet, then bury me in Baqi. Don't insist on fighting. This Marwan is the same one that when the bay'ah for Yazid came and said that take the bay'ah from Imam Hussain, Walid bin Uqba said, I can't do this, bring Marwan back. Marwan is the one who counseled Walid that if Hussain doesn't give you bay'ah, kill him now. This Marwan is the one who Muawiyah gave the marriage proposal of Yazid and said, go to Abdullah ibn Ja'far and propose to him marriage, my son Yazid to his daughter Kulthum. Now when Marwan came and said to Abdullah, there's a marriage proposal for your daughter from Muawiyah for his son Yazid, Abdullah said, stop. I don't have the authority to make this decision. The authority over my daughter Kulthum lays in the hands of her uncle, Imam Hussain. So if you have a marriage proposal to bring it to Hussain ibn Ali, don't bring it to me. Now the idea of transferring wilaya, or of a parent giving wilaya and authority to decide where the marriage of their child goes, is the right that a father has. Naturally, Allah has declared this right in the hands of the father and the paternal grandfather, who can make the decision and approval for where a daughter should be married. But they have the right to give wilaya to someone, a wakil. And whether we say that Abdullah ibn Ja'far did this because he didn't want to deal with the consequences or didn't want to deal with the Banu Umayyah, or whether he did this because he knows that the wilaya of every human being lies in the hands of the Imam, then what's the problem with me giving wilaya to the Imam for my daughter? Abdullah says, and he washed his hands of the situation, go to Imam Hussain, I got nothing to do with you. So sure enough, as Marwan, he decides, okay, if I have to go see Hussain, then I will go in a way that will pressure Hussain into accepting my offer. So he collects the respected elders of the Banu Umayyah and the Banu Hashim, and in the evening he goes to Masjid al-Nabawi and he gathers all of the elders and sits by Imam Hussain. And he says, Amma ba'd. Oh Hussain, Muawiyah, Amir al-Mu'mineen Muawiyah, let's not get into that one, has sent the marriage proposal of his son Yazid for the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ja'far Kulthum. And he has authorized me to make the following conditions for this to be acceptable for you. He says, first and foremost, oh Hussein, Muawiyah has offered that Abdullah may ask for any amount of mahr that he wants. No amount will be too great. He wants 500 dinars of gold, we will give him 500 dinars. He wants 5,000, we will give him 5,000. He wants 50,000, we will give him 50,000 dinars of gold. Whatever he chooses. The second stipulation that Amir Muawiyah, sorry, I apologize, offers is that Abdullah should not include the debts that he possesses into the amount of mahr that he asks. Rather, Muawiyah will satisfy any debts of Abdullah ibn Ja'far in addition to the mahr that he offers him. Thirdly, O Hussein, our clans have a rift between them and there is a conflict between our clans. Let this marriage be a source of closing the rift between our two families and making us one. These are the intentions of Muawiyah. Now I tell you, O Hussein, this Yazid is so special. He is more worthy of receiving a mahr than paying a mahr. Yet look at the munificence and generosity that they are willing to pay a mahr when he is more worthy of receiving a mahr than to give someone else money to marry him. Secondly, O Hussein, I tell you, by making this relationship, there will be more people that will be jealous of you that you have someone like Yazid as a son-in-law than people who would be jealous of us for having one like your daughter as a daughter-in-law. So it will be a raising in your status of accepting this. And finally, I tell you, O Hussein, this Yazid is the one who, when he turns his face to the sky, the clouds send down their rain. I know I want to laugh too. Don't laugh. It's majlis. And he says, "O Hussein, give me a good answer for this proposal. Answer me well for the proposal that I have brought you." Now Imam Hussein begins his reply and he answers each one of these statements made by Marwan. Ready? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam Hussein begins by the mention of Allah and he says, "Oh Allah, give me khair in my affairs and what I am about to deal with." And he says, "Oh Marwan, now for your points. First and foremost, your statement that Muawiyah will offer any amount in mahr that we want. We are the family of Rasulullah and we only take that mahr that is from the tradition and sunnah of Rasulullah, which is the equivalent of 480 dirhams of silver. We'd never ask for a mahr that's more than that. Let me explain this. The mahr of Sayyidah Zahra, salamullahi alayha, when she married Amir al-Mu'minin, was the equivalent of 480 dirhams of silver. In today's dollar value, 480 dirhams of silver ranges between $1,000 and $1,500. At the cost and value of silver from that time of what the weight of silver was for 1 dirham, it's about $1,000 to $1,500. As a tradition, families may choose, and they do sometimes, they choose to continue the same mahr, saying that this was the sunnah of Sayyidah Zahra. And say that this is the mahr that we will write. Now, this doesn't mean that that's all that they give to their new daughter-in-law, but rather they will give her more in appreciation, but as a gift, not as a mahr. So that the mahr that's requested follows the tradition of Sayyidah Zahra, and the rest of it is as a gift that is given in love. Sometimes that's in jewelry, sometimes that's in money, sometimes that's in other aspects of wealth as a recognition and appreciation. But the tradition of still today continuing with that process continues on. And it's not an abnormal practice to make this amount. However, it should be noted that there is no restriction on any family or any person or any girl that she should be limited in the aspect of being able to ask for the mahr that she desires. As a matter of fact, it's something that when we talk to our children about marriage, we should educate them from both sides. One, that for the girl, it's the right of the girl to ask for a mahr, to receive a mahr, and that it is the right that Islam has given to her, and it is an acknowledgement and appreciation of entering into the bounds of marriage. And for a man, that while a mahr is wajib upon you to present, it is not the only gift and kindness that you should show to your wife in relationship, and that it is the beginning of a relationship that you begin with kindness, and that should be a relationship based in kindness and goodness. So Imam Hussein says, us, we only ask for that mahr that is appropriate and following the tradition of the Prophet. As of to your second point that you will settle all of the debts of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, O Marwan, since when have we settled the debts of men on the backs of women? Imam Hussein points out, and he points to the nobility, that it's not the responsibility of a man to count on his women and to rely on his women to settle his debts. But that should a man need to take a debt, it's the responsibility of the man. That we shouldn't be putting the financial burdens on our women or having expectation from our women to settle our debts. That the comment was that if Abdullah had debts, do you imagine that he does not have enough decency and self-respect that he should handle his debts himself and he needs to rely on his daughter to settle his debts? That he's going to make money from the process of marrying his daughter? He's going to take benefit from this? Imam Hussein's statement is very clean. It's very beautiful to show the dignity that each mu'min should have. that one who has faith in Allah, one, don't take debt. But if I have to take debt, it's my debt and my responsibility, not me to rely on the women of my household to fulfill my debts and responsibilities. Even till today, this is an important lesson that should be retained. That since when the followers of Ahlul Bayt satisfy their debts by the hands of their women? It's not our character. It's not our behavior. He goes, as of your third point, that this marriage will close the rift between our two families. He says, O Marwan, the rift between our families is based on a spiritual conflict, not a material conflict. That through a material relationship, our differences would be satisfied. O Marwan, today if it is that we don't have an agreement with your family, it is because of the violation of the rules of Allah. Not that you possess something or we possess something that the other cannot have. Therefore, how can you imagine that the differences between our family would be satisfied through a material relationship? He goes further and he says that nasab will not save you from the wrath of Allah, then how could sabab save you from the wrath of Allah? This statement is very interesting, where he says your family lineage is not something that would protect you from violating the rules of Allah, then how could having this marriage close this rift that is caused by you violating the rules of Allah? The mention of this is to say that look at the example that he presents to say that nasab and relationship won't save you. That even if we were to say that we are related to the Holy Prophet, even if we were to say we are the most noble of lineages, that noble lineage when it comes to the wrath of Allah is not a protection for us. Prime example of this, Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab was the uncle of the Holy Prophet, like Abu Talib, like Hamza, the Shaheed, Sayyid al-Shuhada, like Abbas. But Abu Lahab is the one that Allah Himself curses it in the Quran. Being related to the Holy Prophet was no protection for him when he violated the rules of Allah. The same is true that Imam is saying, that don't imagine that any relationship you can build or any connection that you possess will protect you from the punishment of Allah for violating His rules. Rather to say that that is the priority we think about, and therefore, O Marwan, our families having a marriage between us would never close this rift, because our rift is for the sake of Allah, and until you are following the rules of Allah, we will never be okay with you. Now Imam goes further. You guys ready? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, as to your statement that Yazid is more worthy of receiving a mahar than paying a mahar, Imam says, he says, those who are better than Yazid, the father of Yazid, the grandfather of Yazid, have paid a mahar, then who do you think Yazid is that he should not pay a mahar? You didn't get there. The argument was that Yazid is so good and so valuable and so amazing that people should pay money to marry him, not that Yazid pays a dowry to marry someone else. Imam Hussain says the ones who are better than Yazid, his father and his grandfather, all paid a mahar, then who is Yazid that he shouldn't pay a mahar? The example is in front of us. Imam Ali paid a mahar to marry Sayyidah Zahra. Imam Ali is better than Yazid, his father, his grandfather. Rasulullah paid a mahar, who is better than Yazid, his father, his grandfather. Then how can you make the statement that Yazid is more worthy of receiving a mahar? When Rasulullah paid a mahar, do you imagine that this Yazid is better than Rasulullah? So he says, if those who are better than Yazid, better than his father, better than his grandfather paid a mahar, then who is Yazid not to pay a mahar? He goes, and as far as your second point, to say that more people would be jealous of us that Yazid is our son-in-law, and less people would be jealous of you that Kulthum is your daughter-in-law. Here he says you're right. But those who would be jealous of us for having Yazid are from amongst the ignorant masses. And those who would be jealous of you are from amongst those who would have intellect to know who this daughter of ours is. The Imam's statement is to explain that majority does not always equal right. That at times it's the majority of the ignorant masses who don't know better that they see, oh, Khalifa's son, oh, married to Khalifa's son. But those who don't know that this is ghasib-e-haq, those who have no education to know the harm that this person has done, they would be the ones who are the jealous that, oh, this household has the Khalifa's son as our son-in-law. So Imam Hussain says, yeah, more people will be jealous of us that Yazid is in our house, but they're all ignorant and we don't care about their jealousy. And those who would be jealous of you are the few intellectuals, and they would know where our daughter has gone. So therefore, this jealousy that people may have of us, we don't care about it. It says, as of your third point, that when Yazid looks up to the skies send down the rain. It says this was an attribute of none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it says, you have no right to claim the attributes of Rasulullah for your children. It was Rasulullah that whenever he raised his face to the heavens, that Allah would send down his mercy and barakat on those people wherever he was, not your son. Therefore, we don't want this relationship. And Imam goes further. O people, hear and listen now, that I, having the authority over this daughter, Kulthum, announce her marriage to Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Ja'far. And I announce their marriage for the sunnah and mustahab amount of 480 dirhams as mahar. And I go further and I gift to them from my own growing lands in the city of Medina a piece of property for them. The benefit of this piece of property is that it produces every year 8,000 dinar of gold. And I pray to Allah to give them prosperity from this land and from this wealth. And he ends the conversation. Look at the beauty of the statement of the Imam. He immediately announces the engagement, the marriage of this daughter, so that now that he's ended this conversation, no one can come back and try to pressure the Imam and say, oh, no, you should accept it, it's a good offer. Nope, she's married, it's done. Second, one may say that it was done in animosity and he ruined the future of this girl. She could have been in the palaces. She could have had wealth. Imam what? Gives her an amount of money, a piece of property that produces wealth that will guarantee that there is no loss in wealth or status by having and accepting this marriage. Some may argue and say that it was a good relationship, na'uzubillah, and that it should have been accepted. But there are two structures that we can say that when we look at both religiously and communally, that this was not the right answer. One is the concept of kuf, where kuf means that when we look for a marriageable spouse for our children, we should be looking for someone who not only has material status, worldly status, position, but that in terms of spirituality, there's an equality and balance between the two sides. That the equivalency looks at the idea that spiritually in Iman, am I doing a disservice to my child? Am I pairing them with a partner who doesn't understand what my goal in existence is and growing closer to Allah? This is one aspect, and we would say that this is an important consideration to take, especially in this situation. The second aspect is known as kafa ijtima'iyya. This talks about the idea that we can also look at the social structure of society and see, does this match make sense in society? That it's not just the aspect that, for example, that are these two both from the same religion? Are they both, of the same age? No, look at the culture and the environment that they're marrying into. Is the culture reflective? Today, if, for example, a Shia from China comes and he says, I want to marry your daughter and take her with me to China. Kafa ijtima'iyya is a principle that says that for my child, what is that experience to leave their homeland, their nation, their language, their culture, and move to a culture that would be completely foreign to them and they have no ability to adapt and to live in that society. And on this basis, a person has the right, not that you should, but they have the right to create and say that, no, this isn't a good relationship match. When Imam Hussain looks at this, the idea that that daughter who has grown up in the house of the Ahlul Bayt, has lived by the culture of Ahlul Bayt, to marry her into a house that is one from Sham and one from that who live like kings, there is no similitude in behavior and relationship between these two households that would justify that this is a good relationship to perform. Imam's agreement or disagreement in this matter was based in hikmah, and we look at the wisdom behind it. But we also take a look at this event in history and we say that it's possible that this was considered open disrespect by the Banu Umayyah and by Yazid. And as a consequence, he poured on excessive severity upon Imam Hussain in the event of Karbala. When you look at the event of Karbala and you look at, for example, a war and conflict between two sides, there are some things that don't make sense. That why such severity? Why such evil? Why such harshness? Why such masa'ib that befell Ahlul Bayt? One of the possible explanations is that these interactions between these two sides prior had built up animosity that was aggravated and pushed to create harsh and hardness between them. There are some masa'ib that to understand them will break our heart to be able to understand what happened. There's some poetry written about the masa'ib of Sayyidah Zainab, where they say that we imagine Sayyidah Zainab would say, I am the one who saw the two fires in my life. One was the fire at the door of my mother Zahra, and one was the fire in the field of Karbala. And that fire in Karbala was worse than that fire at the door. There's one event in history that talks about this, that says that when they burned the tents and the women ran from tent to tent, that they said, we don't understand if the intention of Yazid, if the intention of Umar Asad was to rob these people, then he burned the most valuable thing that they possessed, which were these tents. That truly then their intention was not to take their value, but to show them through disgrace and show them difficulty and pain. The second line of this poetry says that Sayyidah Zainab would call out, I am the one who bore witness to the two chests. The chest of my mother that was pierced with a nail, and the chest of Hussain that was trampled with horses. They describe and say that when Amir al-Mu'mineen did the ghusl of Sayyidah Zahra, that he left the room from ghusl and came and sat in a corner weeping. Salman asked, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are Fatih Khaybar. You are the champion of Islam. You are the killer of the enemies. Why then when I see you performing a ghusl do I see you crying? That Amir al-Mu'mineen would reply, Oh Salman, my Zahra had such wounds that she did not even tell me about. Oh Salman, her ribs had been broken from when she was pressed with the wall. Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, if it was difficult for you to see the chest of Zahra with her broken ribs, come and see Zainab who bore witness to the chest of Hussain. That they describe and write that is the chest upon which the horses played. That is the chest that was broken in such ways that when Imam Zainul Abidin came to bury his father, they described he would lift the body from one side and it would fall to pieces from the other. He would lift from the other side and it would fall to pieces from this side. Where he called out, Oh Banu Asad, have you no cloth for me to collect my father in? Sayyidah Zainab would say, I am the one who bear witness to these two chests. The chest of my mother Zahra where her ribs were breaking, and the chest of my Hussain upon which horses were run. Sayyidah Zainab would say, I am the one who witnessed the two trays, the tray with the liver of Hassan and the tray with the head of Hussain. Remember the shahadat of Imam Hassan, that he had been poisoned in such a way that they said that he would cough up blood from his liver. And since he had become so ill because of this, he could not leave the room. So they had put a tray next to him that when he had to leave, let this blood out, he would put it in the tray. Once when he was sitting with Imam Hussain, he says, Oh Hussain, cover this tray. Imam Hussain says, brother, you are in difficulty. He says, I hear the footsteps of our sister Zainab. I don't want to see her to see my blood. And Imam Hussain covered this tray and put it to the side. Sayyidah Zainab is the sister of Ma'asumin. She knew immediately what her brothers were hiding. She went immediately to the tray and uncovered it and said, brother, is this your liver that I see? Sayyidah Zainab is the one. I witnessed the blood of my brother in a tray. And I witnessed the head of Hussain in a tray. In the Masa'ib of Sham, we see that when that young child cries, I want my father, they presented to her a covered tray and they said, child, take this. She said, I did not ask you for food, I asked you for my father. They said, oh, lift the cover, you will find what you would desire. The child looks at the face and the head and said, are you my father, Hussain? Who colored your beard red with your blood? Who cut your veins? Man aytamani fi sikhri sinni. Then Sayyidah Zainab would be the one who would recite, I am the one who was stopped in 2 stations, one in the court of Ubaydullah and one in the court of the Mal'un Yazid. That the masa'ib and the abuse that Sayyidah Zainab faced was not just the masa'ib of Imam Hussain, but even her own difficulty. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept a small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis, the marhumin of the sponsors of tonight's majlis, all those who are present tonight in this majlis, and all those who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, by the right of the tears in our eyes, we have gathered here with hajat. Ya Allah, fulfill the hajat of the mu'mineen. Ya Allah, those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness, Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman, and entitle us to the shafa of Abu Abdullah in dunya and akhirah. Matim Hussain.
Hai hai Zainab, hai hai Shah, 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 hai hai Zainab, hai hai Zainab, hai hai Shah, hai hai Zainab, hai hai Shah. शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की हंसते हैं सारे बाजार वाले हंसते हैं सारे बाजार वाले रोती है हाय बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है में उठाए बेटी अली की जाना है उसको दरबार शामी चारों तरफ है मजमा शराबी जाना है उसको दरबार शामी चारों तरफ है मजमा शराबी ज़ैनब के सर पर चादर नहीं है ज़ैनब के सर पर चादर नहीं है किस तरह जाए बेटी अली की शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। था जिसका भाई अब्बास गाजी, है आज कैदी वो शाहजादी। था जिसका भाई अब्बास गाजी, है आज कैदी वो शाहजादी। ये शोर सुनकर गैरत के मारे, ये शोर सुनकर गैरत के मारे, कहीं मर न जाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों, सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। पर हजारों सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। चारों तरफ है माहौल ऐसा, जैसे लगा हो कोई तमाशा। चारों तरफ है माहौल ऐसा, जैसे लगा हो कोई तमाशा। अब्बास आजा चादर उड़ा जा, अब्बास आजा चादर उड़ा जा, घबरा ना जाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों, सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। जुल्फे पकड़ कर शिमरे लाइने, मारे तमाचे तड़पी सकीना। जुल्फे पकड़ कर शिमरे लाइने, मारे तमाचे तड़पी सकीना। ज़ैनब के दोनों बाजू बंधे हैं, ज़ैनब के दोनों बाजू बंधे हैं, कैसे छुड़ाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों, सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों, सदमे उठाए बेटी अली की। बरसा रहे हैं पत्थर सितमगर, लगते हैं पत्थर बीबी के सर पर। बरसा रहे हैं पत्थर सितमगर, लगते हैं पत्थर बीबी के सर पर। बाजू बंदे हैं बेबस है खुद को, बाजू बंदे हैं बेबस है खुद को, कैसे बचाए बेटी अली की। शाम आ रही है दिल पर हजारों,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي، يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا هجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير عمل حي على خير عمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه محسن قد أتاك المصير الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم. لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله رب السماوات السبع ورب الأراضين السبع وما فيهن ما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا ولي العافية نسألك اللهم العافية عافية الدين والدنيا والآخرة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Just a few reminders before we start Isha Salat. We are very excited to announce our very first CFK Business Management Internship Program. This paid internship is targeted for college students of any major who want to gain experience and learn how an organization works. To learn more about this program, please visit our website or get in touch with Brother Zohair for more details. Just another quick announcement that this upcoming Saturday and Friday, we do have a program for the martyrdom of Bibi Sakina alayhi salam. Program will start at 6:30 with the recitation of Holy Quran and speech by Shaykh Amin followed afterwards. Please note there's also a Shabadari this upcoming Saturday at 9 p.m. at CFK hosted by Anjuman Sher Khoda. For more details, please look at their flyers that have been posted around the group chats. As this is Shaykh's last night with us, the CFK community would humbly like to extend our sincere gratitude and our thanks to the Shaykh for coming all this way and blessing us with his knowledge. For the safety and well-being for Shaykh, please recite a loud salawat. Shaykh, inshallah, we hope to see you back soon. We have been very fortunate to have you here. With that, I will turn it back to Shaykh for Isha Salat with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ادخلنا في كل خير أدخلت فيه محمدا وآل محمد وأخرجنا من كل سوء أخرجت منه محمدا وآل محمد وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا جليل ارحم عبدك الذليل. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران. لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء، أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبلي من. وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزق قالي واسعة، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم. صلوات.